The Blackburn Buccaneer was built in 1958 to fly off Royal Navy carriers at wave height. It was subsonic. It was heavy. Its fuselage bulged in the middle like a piece of fruit, and the men who flew it called it the banana jet. 19 years later, in the high desert of Nevada, that fruit-shaped fuselage did something no Mach 2 fighter in the United States Air Force could do. It vanished. Not with speed, not with stealth coatings that had not yet been invented. It vanished because of a shape that everyone had looked at and nobody had understood. To understand why that mattered, you have to begin at Nellis Air Force Base on the northern edge of Las Vegas in the middle of the 1970s. This was the home of Red Flag, established in 1975 as the most punishing air combat exercise on the planet. It had been born out of a specific American wound. Over Vietnam, United States pilots had died in numbers nobody had expected, and the studies that followed found a brutal pattern. A crew that survived its first 10 combat missions usually survived the war. Most of the dead never reached Mission 10. Red Flag existed to give aircrews those 10 missions in the safety of the Nevada range, flown against simulated Soviet radar, simulated surface-to-air missile batteries, and the finest fighter the West had yet fielded, the F-15 Eagle. A machine that could climb past 60,000 feet and run beyond twice the speed of sound. And everything about the exercise rested on one quiet assumption: the enemy would fly high enough to be seen. Into that arena, in 1977, the Royal Air Force sent the Buccaneer. To the Americans watching them taxi out, the aircraft looked like a mistake. It was old. It was subsonic in an age of Mach 2 interceptors. It sat low and wide and heavy on its undercarriage, with a blunt nose and that strange swollen waist. Worse, in the eyes of a proud Air Force, it was a hand-me-down. The Buccaneer had been designed by Blackburn aircraft for the Royal Navy, conceived to sink Soviet Sverdlov cruisers from the decks of carriers like Ark Royal that Britain had since decided it could no longer afford. When those carriers went, the Royal Air Force inherited the aircraft with something close to reluctance and resignation. The men at Nellis looked at it the way you look at a piece of farm machinery that has wandered onto a racetrack. They spent the first day amused. They would spend the rest of the week being wrong. The swelling in the fuselage was the first clue, and it was the one everybody missed. That bulge was not clumsiness. It was area ruling, a design principle that shapes an aircraft so that the total cross-section of its body changes smoothly from nose to tail. The Buccaneer's fuselage was pinched in behind the cockpit and swollen over the wing, giving it that unmistakable Coke bottle waist, the curve that earned it the banana nickname. Blackburn had gone further still, fitting a rotating bomb bay that turned inside the fuselage rather than opening into the airflow. So nothing broke that clean profile at high speed down low. The purpose was to tame the shock waves that build as an aircraft nears the speed of sound, cutting the sudden rise in drag and letting a heavy machine drive through dense, low-altitude air without tearing itself apart. Every line of it answered a single demand written into Naval Staff Requirement NA-39. Fly fast, fly low, and stay controllable in the thick, punishing air a few feet above the waves. The second clue was hidden in the wings and the engines. The earlier S-1 had been fitted with de Havilland Gyron Jr. engines and was badly underpowered, a genuine flaw that nearly ended the program. The S-2 replaced them with two Rolls-Royce SEE turbofans, each producing around 11,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, a surplus of power exactly where it was needed most, down low. That power fed a system called boundary layer control. High-pressure air, bled from the compressors, was blown across the leading edges and the flaps of the wing, energizing the airflow and holding it attached to the surface at speeds where an ordinary wing would stall. The result was a heavy aircraft that stayed rock-steady in conditions that flung lighter, faster jets around the sky. Its mass, the very thing that made it look sluggish on the ground, let it drive through low-level turbulence like a train on rails, while an F-15 bounced and corrected in the air above it. And so, in the wide brown emptiness of the Nevada range, the Buccaneers went to work. They flew at 20 feet above the desert floor at close to 600 miles an hour, so low that the rocks and scrub of the Mojave blurred into a single brown stream beneath the cockpit, so low that they slipped beneath the radar horizon entirely, screened by every ridge and dry riverbed between them and the defenders. They refueled from Victor tankers, pressed in along the valleys, and used the ground itself as cover. The F-15 crews knew they were coming and still could not stop them. You cannot intercept what refuses to climb into your radar picture. The Buccaneers threaded the terrain, appeared over their targets almost without warning, struck, and were gone before the defense could resolve what had happened. On the scoreboard that governed the exercise, the kills logged for the British side. Again, and again, and again. When the exercise staff sat down to write up the results, they were left with a number that did not fit their model. The most advanced air defense training system on Earth had been unable to generate an acceptable interception rate against a subsonic bomber from a Navy that no longer put to sea. The assessment conceded the gap in plain language. The threat model had been built for aircraft in the altitudes where radar lived, and it had not been built for something that simply refused to go there. The lesson was not that the Buccaneer was faster, or newer, or better equipped. It was slower and older than almost everything else in the sky that week. The lesson was that its shape and its doctrine had reached into a part of the problem that nobody at United States Tactical Air Command had thought to defend. This is the part that outlived the exercise. The Buccaneer had not beaten the F-15 in a contest of raw performance, because there was no such contest to be had. It had beaten the assumptions wrapped around the F-15. Every threat the defenders trained against was a threat that behaved the way their instruments expected it to behave. The banana jet declined to behave that way. That idea of penetrating low and unseen rather than high and fast would echo forward for decades. It ran through the low-level tornado strikes of the 1991 Gulf War, and, in a stranger form, through the entire logic of stealth, which is also, at bottom, a way of not being where the radar is looking. The shape that men had laughed at on the ramp at Nellis was, the whole time, the answer to a question the Americans had forgotten to ask. The most expensive philosophy in the sky in 1977 was beaten by a fruit-shaped fuselage and an old idea about flying very, very low. If you want more stories about the moments when Doctrine quietly beat hardware, subscribe and stay with us. Next time, we take the same idea to sea, where a fleet everyone had written off asked the same forgotten question.